Hi all, I thought we could have a look at another very interesting game from the FIDE Grand Prix. It was in round 3 actually. Fabiano Caruana, one of the strongest players in the world at the moment, rank 3 I believe, was playing Evgeny Tomashevsky. He played d4 and Tomashevsky played d5, and we see c4 and a very reliable, respectable opening the Slav defence. The Slav and the Greenfield are really on the rage for many strong players, especially above 2700. It's one of the most popular choices nowadays. Knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, a6. This is quite trendy as well, a6. Sometimes it gives the resource k7, which it looks a bit weird, protecting b7 in some variations. It's a very cute idea. a4. So if black wanted to snatch the pawn, this is discouraging it now. White should be able to recollect this pawn. e6, bishop f4, a solid move it seems. And now here, black actually played a5. That's actually the most common move in this position. There's 17 games in Livebook. e3, so far pretty standard. And there's a few games with bishop e2 or bishop d3, handful. But actually a bit of a surprise move here. You would have thought Caruana's known for being a real positional player. What do you think he played here if I give you 5 seconds? A surprising looking move. And clue, it's not bishop e2 or bishop d3. 500 points if you get it right. So 5 seconds starting from now. Okay. g4. I think this makes the game very interesting. I actually played against the Slav myself in Over the Board, which I like to show you earlier in the season, and had a similar. I played a similar looking idea, g4. You might think it's a bit crazy, g4, but if black actually takes it, then white gets good activity. Rook g1. Say the knight goes back, we take on g7. We fragmented black's pawns. We've got an active rook. Say the rook returns back. We're looking forward now to bishop d3 and knight e5. It's an active position. White can later maybe even castle queenside if he wants the castle. Of course, he's forfeited the castling rights, but it's a very interesting dynamic position. So here, how does Tomashevsky react to this? He plays actually knight a6, a consistent plan. That's losing a tempo with a5 to mark out white's weakness. b4. Of course, g5, and it's difficult here. Knight h5 might look ludicrous, but might be one of the better ideas, as well as just simply knight d7. On knight h5, not entirely easy to exploit the knight immediately, but a move like bishop e5 seems a bit uncomfortable for black. Like this, it looks a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe here, white is going to have moves like knight h2. That's actually, I'm going to turn something off. Bit of distraction. There's some prospects for white. So anyway, the knight went d7, h4, supporting that pawn. Knight b4. Okay, so black's trying to react positionally, just using that b4 square. Bishop e2, b6. Trying to sort out the light square bishop, not committing yet to castling. It would seem a little bit scary, as though white's got a ready-made attack with these two pawns here. h5, bishop b7, so black's cautiously just playing on the queen side for a moment. C takes d5. Now black really perhaps doesn't want to give that b5 square to white, so he actually takes like this, trying to keep things solid, less entry points. Especially a knight and bishop coordinating on c7 or d6 is not very nice if the knight was allowed to be on b5. Queen d2. Now a very interesting move actually from black. f5. It kind of weakens potentially this diagonal if black's going to castle kingside. With a move like f5, it does trigger off a lot of thoughts automatically about forcing moves in relation to this diagonal and the checks that might arise. It's a move which needs to be played with some caution. It's often a cause of actually winning games tactically when a move like f5 is played. But here, it seems the centre at the moment is locked up, and black with f5 is locking down the e4 square. And perhaps Fabiano Caruana doesn't like that state of affairs, and he wants to actually break out with e4 later. So his decision, g takes f6, maybe is in line with that. Black now didn't actually play knight takes f6. Maybe there's a bit of concern about knight e5. It looks quite an impressive knight on e5. This position, knight e5, looks interesting. He actually took the bishop. Now h6, seemingly blocking white's own potential like open lines of attack later. h6, but it does install a potentially dangerous pawn here. This is often useful in endgames, but also even in the middle game. It's an attacking unit, potentially like a goal hanging pawn around the idea of checkmating the opponent's king. It's hanging around the opponent's king position if he does castle kingside. And here actually, with this pawn on h6, white actually opens up the centre now with e4. And if e5 is allowed, then that's potentially a dangerous passed pawn here. It's taken, isolating white's d pawn, knight takes, and now black castles, offering on a plate the dark square bishop. But does white want to do that? He'd give black some active play maybe on the f file. And here also black is ready to strike out with c5, opening up this bishop where there's clearly some issues, some weaknesses. Without the pawn on g2, this diagonal is a bit more fragile than usual. White actually castles here, not taking that bishop. Black uses the blockade square d5. So knight takes f4 and c5 would seem pleasant. So the bishop drops back. Look at where white's castled. There's a pawn on a4. This looks like an unusual configuration. Okay, but how does black actually get to white's king here? We have bishop a6 trying to soften white up on the light squares, maybe, but of course black's light squares are also softened up with this bishop exchange. Bishop takes, rook takes. Rook he1, a centralizing move, and preserving things like queen e2 or queen d3. Well, queen d3, knight b4 protects and attacks, so queen e2 might be sneakier if there's a potential for a double attack here with an idea like taking or moving the knight for queen e6 later, as well as hitting the rook. The rook really wants to get away from being a tempo generator here for white. It goes out of the way cautiously. So what has happened here? Maybe black's happy in certain respects. He's got a nice blockade on d5. His king seems a bit snug, especially with his pawn on h6. There's no open lines gazing down, with rooks gazing down at his king, so straightforwardly anyway. White now plays king b1. For white, though, there does seem to be nice central pressure and control. And in fact, after king b1, that c6 pawn, which was defended by the bishop, seems a little bit more vulnerable now. We have bishop e7, looking at the f3 knight that needs to be protected or moved. Queen d3 is played. And this not only protects the knight, there are some options as well. Maybe for the queen, c4 later, for the knight to retreat here, putting pressure on d5. Okay, so rook f5. And now we see knight e5 looking at c6. And yes, this looks like an unpleasant pressure on the queen side, funny enough. Forget the king side. Unpleasant pressure on the queen side. We see queen c8. And now knight c3. White really could be threatening knight takes and then rook c1 with a pleasant advantage on the queen side. And the queen is ideally placed maybe to come to b5 later. So here black took on c3. And we have queen takes c3 looking at that c6 knight, and also this g7 looks a bit ominous, and also queen c4 check and knight f7 look dangerous. So there's some dangerous possibilities with this knight on e5, and it's here that it seems actually this pawn is exerting an attacking influence, even though it has closed down the lines of attack. There are some menacing possibilities, and possibilities removed from black, like the king moving to g7. This check seems a bit more dangerous than usual because of this, what we can call a goal hanging pawn. And black plays perhaps a lesser evil move then, knight takes e5, but it does give white a potentially strong passed pawn in the centre. White doesn't automatically take this though. He plays, curiously, a check on b3. Now if the knight retreats, then white can actually just take the bishop instead, and that would be very, very nice for white. Here rook f7 is played, d takes e5, and that is a strong central passed pawn. White still has the goal hanging pawn, which Kasparov often describes as like an extra piece in the attack, these pawns around the king. Check, king a2. The white king seems quite snug. Bishop b4 hitting the rook. That's ignored, or rather countered, with e6 hitting black's rook. Rook e7. And now again, this is ignored. There's something better for white to do than parry this threat. White actually just attacks the rook on e7 again, and it's trying to lift the blockade on the pawn. Black actually gives in to this. He doesn't want to take on e1 to allow bishop takes e7. He actually moves the rook, and now we have e7 check. This is starting to look really quite dangerous. Queen f7, but now surely the rook's going to move. It does move, but aggressively, to e6 now. So looking at perhaps taking on c6, or queen d3, rook f3 would be dangerous, trying to get a kind of discovered check of some sort against the black king. b5 is played here, not minding if white took on c6, but you know, white's got better things to do here surely than take on c6 now. This pawn is really dangerous, and in that respect, rook d8. This is immediately threatening. Rook takes, and then e8 using the pin on the queen. So black has to react to this, surely. Well, b takes a4 hits the queen. Queen e3. And this is a very, very difficult position after queen e3. It seems as though the queen is ready here to come to e5 to look at g7. So what does black actually do here? If he takes, he's doomed with e takes. This is bishop supporting the passed pawn. If he moves the rook, then maybe just taking here in queen e5, and it looks as though black's in a hopeless position there, trying to defend g7 and this pawn. So he gives up a piece. Bishop takes e7. This is not a good sign. Rook takes, and white wins a piece. Bishop takes e7. So it seems Caruana is conducting an attack with a fawn pawn instead of opening up lines. He's a piece up. Rook e8. It's a nuisance pin for the moment, and pin two ways potentially, so white gets out of one of them. a3, this seems a little bit desperate. It's just taken actually. Queen f5, looking at the rook to try and cause some trouble. But here just queen c3, just ignoring the rook, just looking at g7 now. The goal hanging pawn rears its head. Black actually resigned here. He is a piece down. If Tomashevsky continued with, say, queen f7, I think white can just play queen e5, still looking at g7, and slowly support the rook with f4, f5. It seems fairly hopeless, this position, f4, f5. And now the bishop would be free to move once the rook is supported like this, and black dare not take here, would be opening up too many lines to his king on the g file. So that's the kind of winning plan which would probably be used. So here, yeah, after queen c3, black actually resigned anyway. A very, very interesting game. That early g4 shows that the Slav defense need not be lacking in excitement. It depends how white plays against it. So for hack attackers like me who love to attack, this game is a breath of fresh air and an inspiration. Moves like g4 seem to be cropping up in all sorts of opening systems, and this is something which my good friend Paul Georgiou had observed a few years back in a video. We talked about this g4. It's been cropping up in many, many different types of opening systems. So here, yes, it seems to have proven that it can create a very, very exciting game. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.